Greetings, welcome ladies and gents, I'm the Super Gamer, and yeah, I'm not in my usual spot. The lighting is bad in the usual spot, so I have to stick with my bed until the time of day changes, so just forget about that. Anyway, we got a special episode here today because we're going to take a look at what has already become one of my favorite games of all time, and that game is Celeste. Celeste is an indie game created by Noel Barry and Matt Thorson as a prototype for the Pico 8 video game system in 4 days and was eventually made into its own game. However, that's only scratching the surface of the brilliance this game has to offer, since it's already become one of my favorite games of all time from just my first playthrough. Why is that exactly? Well, let's find out together. Ladies and gents, this is Celeste. Celeste is about a young woman known as Madeline on her way to climb the famous Celeste Mountain for a presumably unknown motive. The local old woman who lives there, however, warns her that the mountain is a very strange place that changes the people who explore it for better or worse. While climbing, Madeline meets another hiker named Theo, who is a really chill dude who loves to take selfies. Early on into the adventure, Madeline discovers a dark reflection of herself named Madeline, lame I know, which quickly becomes a hindrance to her. That's about as far as I'll go with the story here, since there's so much more to it that I dare not spoil it here. Trust me, it'll be so worth it when you play the game yourself. But let's move on to the aesthetics. Celeste is one of the most beautiful looking indie games I have played in quite some time, and I mean that in more ways than one. The environments are all really gorgeous and frankly artistic to look at. The special hand-drawn scenes whenever you beat a stage are also really beautiful. They just display so much character all in just a single shot, as they reflect the result of you beating that particular stage. The music is some of the best I've heard from a game in such a long time. Though I realize a good majority of it is digital, I don't mind. My favorite part about the music is that it knows when to sound happy, when to sound melancholy, and when to sound mysterious. It gives every stage more of a sense of identity, making them all the more memorable. The sound design is very minimalistic, which I would normally have an issue with, but for Celeste, it really works. The sound effects are designed in a way where you can hear them for sure, but they're faint enough so they subconsciously play with the gameplay. The only real criticism I have with the aesthetics is that the actual sprites themselves look weird for the fact that they have no facial features at all. I don't know, I feel like they could have at least given the characters button eyes or at least a friggin' nose, but they don't, so now they look strange because of it. Celeste falls under the game genre of hard but fair kind of indie game. At its core, Celeste is a platformer, and you all know I love myself a good platformer. You can dash once while in the air and climb walls for a certain amount of time. The goal is to reach the end of the stage as smoothly as you possibly can. Now, that doesn't sound so bad, does it? Well, here's the thing. In Celeste, you die a lot. Like, a lot. Like, 827 times a lot. Yeah, this is one of those games where death is really common, but just like in Super Meat Boy, the game doesn't punish you for making mistakes with stuff like giving you a loading screen every time you die. Tomb Raider! As a matter of fact, the game encourages you to make mistakes since it's how you're learning to get better in this game. Hey, school system? You tell us to take notes, but I think you could take some friggin' notes from this game to improve your piece of crap education system. And even though death is common in this game, it's nothing more than just a slap on the wrist, since you respawn in just a couple of seconds at the start of the screen you're on. And while we're talking about the platforming itself, I like to look at the many screens in this game as different puzzles for each and every location. Again, no two areas are the same, with their own tools and obstacles to wrap your head around. In every level, you can also find strawberries in specific locations. Some of them are easy to get, while others require some very tricky platforming to obtain. Heck, there are even strawberries that will fly away if you use the dash move on that screen, and you have to leave the screen to respawn them. Thankfully though, these are completely optional. If you don't want to go for them, you don't have to, which is how it should be in platformers. But by going after them, not only do you get some way more challenging platforming segments, but the more of them you have, the better the final hand-drawn scene will be. There are also secret B-side tapes hidden in all the levels, which unlock harder versions of the levels respectively. As far as criticisms are concerned, my only ones are sometimes it's not made clear how a certain section in the game is solved, and the third level in the game is a bit more on the frustrating side. But that's really the worst I can say. With that said, why don't we take a look at the later parts of the game?
Ah, spoiler alert!
So, the reason I didn't bring up too much about the story is because Celeste's plot handles some pretty heavy topics. Stuff like depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. At the end of the second stage, Madeline calls her mother from the local payphone to tell her that she's feeling overwhelmed with anxiety from climbing the mountain. Then, at the end of the fourth stage, when Madeline and Theo are riding a gondola, Madeline comes along and stops it in its tracks, with Theo accidentally breaking the lever. And this causes Madeline to straight up have a panic attack. Right there, in the middle of the air. Then, in one of the game's most brilliant moments, Theo helps her by having the player use wind to balance a feather, to resemble breathing. Eventually, it's revealed that Madeline is the physical manifestation of everything Madeline is afraid of. Anxieties and everything. After an intense chase, Madeline confronts Madeline, and by accepting each other as one, Madeline is now able to dash twice in the air, which is one of the smartest ways of introducing new abilities that I have ever seen. With her anxiety accepted, she finally makes her way to the peak of the mountain along with the most beautiful end screen I've ever seen from an indie game. After she climbs back down to the surface, she, Theo, Madeline, the old woman, and the owner of the hotel from the third level all come together to enjoy themselves on delicious strawberry pie. Look at this end screen. This screen alone has made this whole journey worth every minute. And the funny thing is, this game is only about 5 to 7 hours depending on your skill. Yet it still feels like I came back from a long journey. Now look, I enjoyed Undertale for its writing, characters, and the unique spin on the RPG formula. But the message that it was conveying is one that we've seen dozens of times before in other games. Violence is wrong. Celeste's story and message is just done so well. It touched me on such an emotional level. I've mentioned briefly about my anxiety and depression, but I've never explicitly told what I went through. I'll be keeping names left out for the sake of privacy, but here we go. In February of 2018, I met a certain individual who I started to have feelings for. I told her about it, and she admitted she felt the same way. Now, we were in different states, so we couldn't exactly date, but man did we want to. However, another friend told me that she had been dealing with depression and had been contemplating suicide. This was the start of my presumably never-ending anxiety. Day after day, I would just start to get worried about my friend's safety and mental health, to the point where I would start having anxiety attacks. For me at least, they consisted of me sitting in one spot, with my emotions and thoughts freaking out, along with a feeling of emptiness. It didn't help that there were moments where the individual I liked nearly did decide to kill himself. The anxiety I was feeling eventually started to affect the way I acted to other people I knew in person. Very rude and distant. That only added to my anxiety more and more, and it eventually spiraled right to depression. There were several nights where I was in bed crying, thinking I only hurt the people I was trying to help. I had many nights where I thought about ending myself just so I don't have to feel all this anymore. My emotional health was in shambles. Then, in October of 2018, everything started changing for the better. After some of the worst moments ever, I started talking to some new people I met on social media, and they listened to me vent about my problems. They didn't talk back, they didn't judge me for what I was feeling, they listened. And now, one of these individuals is my best friend ever, Jake. I know I said I wouldn't name names, but I've mentioned him before on this channel. Jake is one of the best people that I have ever met in my life. We've gotten to the point where we exchanged each other's phone numbers. Jake, if you're watching this, thank you for everything. I hope our friendship lasts forever. Now I know what you're thinking. What does any of this have to do with Celeste? Well, because I played this game when things were starting to look up. When I was ready to be amazed by video games again. Majora's Mask helped me deal with the grief over a friend, but Celeste helped me deal with my anxiety and guilt. And I can't thank this game enough for it. So overall, Celeste is an amazing game. The story's amazing, the characters are amazing, and the gameplay is so much fun. It's a beautiful looking game, and just, oh my god, it handles such serious topics in such genius ways. Like, it's so much so that, like, I'm never gonna forget this game. Never. I could be like 80 years old, and I'll still remember this game. So, needless to say, this game gets my highest rating, 5 out of 5. Until then, I'm the Super Gamer, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!